If the captain of your team ever asks you to dinner and calls it your first date, do not assume he is joking, because I made that mistake, and it changed everything. That sentence would have sounded impossible to me only a few weeks earlier, back when Noah Brooks was simply the captain everyone admired from a respectful distance. He was the kind of person people noticed the moment he stepped onto the dock. Tall, confident, and calm under pressure, he led every rowing practice with quiet authority instead of loud speeches. Freshmen looked up to him. Seniors trusted him. Even our coaches seemed to relax whenever Noah was in charge because they knew he would never let the team lose focus. I was just Ethan Walker, a first-year student who had joined the rowing team hoping to make a few friends and maybe prove to myself that I belonged somewhere new. College felt exciting, but it also felt overwhelming. Every building looked enormous. Every classroom seemed full of strangers, and every morning I reminded myself that everyone else probably had their lives figured out better than I did. The rowing team became the only place where I felt even a little familiar. I loved the sound of the water before sunrise, the steady rhythm of the oars, and the feeling that everyone had to move together to make the boat glide forward. Even then, I rarely spoke unless someone asked me a question. Noah noticed everything. He remembered everyone's names after the first week, encouraged nervous freshmen without making them feel embarrassed, and somehow balanced being approachable with being respected. I never expected him to notice me beyond the usual greetings before practice. That Tuesday afternoon started like any other. Practice ended after nearly 2 hours on the river. My shoulders ached, my shoes were damp from the dock, and I was stuffing my water bottle into my backpack while most of the team headed toward the parking lot. I planned to grab a sandwich, finish a design assignment, and call my parents before the day ended. Then I heard someone say my name. Ethan. I turned around and saw Noah walking toward me with his rowing bag slung over one shoulder. He looked completely relaxed, as though he wanted to ask something ordinary. "Do you have plans Friday evening?" he asked. My first instinct was to wonder whether I had forgotten a team meeting. "I do not think so," I answered carefully. Noah smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Good. I would like you to come to dinner with me." I blinked once, convinced I had misunderstood him. Before I could respond, he added something that made the world around me seem strangely quiet. "I want it to be our very first date." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline that never came. A couple of teammates walked past us laughing about something completely unrelated, unaware that my heartbeat had suddenly become louder than every sound on campus. "You are serious?" I finally managed to ask. Noah nodded without hesitation. "Completely serious." I searched his face for any hint of teasing, any sign that this was some harmless prank meant to entertain the team, but there was nothing except calm certainty. "You do not have to answer today," he said softly. "Think about it. I only wanted you to know that I asked because I genuinely wanted to, not because anyone suggested it." With that, he wished me a good evening and walked toward the parking lot, leaving me standing beside the empty dock holding my backpack, while one impossible question echoed through my mind. Why would the captain choose me for our very first date? The next morning, I convinced myself that I had imagined the entire conversation until I walked onto the dock and saw Noah already organizing the rowing shells with the same calm confidence he showed every day. Nothing about his expression suggested that anything unusual had happened between us. He greeted every teammate with the same relaxed smile, handed out practice assignments, and reminded everyone about the weekend training schedule before we carried the boats to the water. For a moment, I wondered if I had misunderstood his words after all. Maybe he had meant something completely different. Maybe I had let my imagination get ahead of me. Then our eyes met across the dock, and he gave me a small smile that lasted only a second before returning his attention to the team. Somehow that single glance erased every doubt. He had meant exactly what he said. I tried to focus on practice, but my timing slipped more than once. My rowing partner asked if I was feeling tired, and I blamed a late night studying even though I had barely slept because my thoughts kept replaying Friday evening over and over again. When practice finally ended, I hoped I could leave before anyone noticed how distracted I looked. That plan disappeared almost immediately. A senior named Tyler walked beside me toward the equipment shed with an amused grin. "So," he said, "what did the captain want yesterday?" I forced myself to shrug. "Nothing important." Tyler laughed. "That is funny because he almost never waits around after practice unless something matters." Before I could answer, another teammate joined us. Did Noah recruit you for some leadership project? Someone asked. Or did you volunteer for extra workouts? I shook my head, trying to sound casual. It was just a conversation. They accepted the answer, but I could tell they were curious. College teams were small communities. People noticed even the smallest changes. By lunchtime, I started catching brief looks from teammates whenever I walked into the dining hall. Nobody said anything directly, yet conversations seemed to pause for half a second before continuing again. Whether I was imagining it or not, I could not tell. The only person acting completely normal was Noah. Later that afternoon, I found him helping one of the freshmen adjust an erg machine before quietly answering questions from another student about race strategy. He treated everyone with the same patience. Watching him made my confusion even worse. If he wanted to keep his invitation private, why had he asked me so openly beside the dock where anyone could have walked past? If he wanted to hide his feelings, he had chosen a strange way to do it. As I packed my bag to leave campus, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. I opened it and immediately recognized Noah because he had signed his name beneath a single sentence. Friday at 6 o'clock, unless you decide that you would rather say no, and whatever your answer is, I will respect it completely. I stared at the screen for several long seconds before slipping the phone back into my pocket. He was giving me every opportunity to walk away, yet somehow that only made his invitation feel more sincere. For the first time since coming to college, I realized that the hardest decision I had to make was not about classes, grades, or rowing. It was whether I was brave enough to believe that someone I deeply admired had truly chosen me. Friday arrived much faster than I expected, yet every hour before it seemed unusually slow. I spent the entire morning pretending to pay attention during my design classes while my mind wandered somewhere completely different. Every assignment, every lecture, and every conversation eventually circled back to the same question. Was this really a date, or was I about to misunderstand everything in the most embarrassing way possible? By noon, I had already checked the weather 3 different times, even though the forecast barely changed. Clear skies, light breeze, and cool autumn temperatures around 65 degrees. It sounded like the perfect evening, which somehow made me even more nervous. After classes ended, I returned to my dorm room much earlier than usual. My roommate glanced up from his laptop and immediately noticed something was different. "You look like you are preparing for a job interview," he joked as I opened my closet for what felt like the 10th time. I laughed awkwardly but never explained why. One sweater looked too casual. One button-down shirt felt too formal. Another outfit made me feel like I was trying too hard. I changed clothes several times before finally settling on a simple navy sweater, dark jeans, and clean white sneakers. I wanted to look presentable without pretending to be someone I was not. Even after deciding, I kept checking the mirror, smoothing imaginary wrinkles, and wondering if my hair looked different every time I walked past the reflection. At 3 o'clock, my phone buzzed with another message from Noah. "No pressure. I will pick you up outside your residence hall at 6. Comfortable clothes are perfect." I smiled without realizing it. Somehow he had answered the exact question I had been worrying about all afternoon. There was nothing dramatic in his message, yet it made me feel calmer. He seemed to understand that I was probably overthinking everything. Across campus, although I did not know it then, Noah was making quiet choices of his own. One of the assistant coaches had invited several upperclassmen to meet a former rowing alumnus who was visiting that evening, an opportunity many students would have accepted immediately because the graduate had become a successful engineer and often helped athletes find internships. Noah thanked the coach sincerely, but explained that he already had an important commitment. He could not move. Nobody questioned his decision because Noah rarely canceled plans unless they truly mattered. Instead of attending the networking event, he stopped by a small neighborhood bookstore near downtown. The owner greeted him by name, and after spending several minutes looking through the shelves, Noah purchased a beautifully illustrated collection of American landscape photography because he remembered hearing me mention during practice that I enjoyed drawing nature scenes whenever I needed to relax. He asked the owner to wrap it in simple brown paper without ribbons or decorations because he wanted it to feel thoughtful instead of overwhelming. As the afternoon sunlight slowly faded into early evening, I stood outside my residence hall with my hands tucked into my pockets, trying to steady my breathing. At exactly 6 o'clock, a dark blue pickup truck rolled to a gentle stop in front of the curb. Noah stepped out with an easy smile, wearing a charcoal jacket instead of his usual team gear. For the first time since joining the rowing team, he did not look like the captain everyone admired. He simply looked like someone genuinely excited to spend an evening with me, and that realization made my heart race even faster than before. Noah opened the passenger door with an easy smile, and somehow that simple gesture made the evening feel even more real. "Thank you for saying yes," he said as I climbed into the truck. "I almost did not," I admitted with a nervous laugh. "I spent 2 days wondering if you were joking." Noah shook his head gently before pulling away from campus. "I was hoping you would believe me eventually." The drive began comfortably enough. Soft music played quietly through the speakers while the golden colors of late autumn covered the streets around the university. We talked about ordinary things instead of anything dramatic. Noah asked about my design classes, my hometown, and whether I had discovered a favorite coffee shop near campus yet. I learned that he had originally planned to study architecture before switching to engineering because he enjoyed solving practical problems. The conversation flowed naturally, and for the first time since he invited me, I forgot to be nervous. About 20 minutes later, dark gray clouds suddenly gathered across the sky much faster than either of us expected. A light rain turned into a heavy downpour within minutes, forcing Noah to slow down as windshield wipers struggled to keep up. "Well," he said with an amused smile, "our perfect evening just became a little less perfect." I laughed. "Maybe the weather wants us to reschedule." "Not a chance," he replied immediately. "I have been looking forward to tonight for too long." When we reached the restaurant, we discovered another problem waiting for us. The outdoor seating area where Noah had reserved a quiet table had already been closed because of the storm, and the manager apologized that every indoor table had been given away after several large groups arrived unexpectedly to escape the rain. Noah thanked the staff politely without showing even a hint of frustration. As we hurried back toward the truck beneath a shared umbrella, rain splashed across the sidewalk, while cool wind carried colorful leaves through the parking lot. "I am sorry," Noah said. "I really wanted everything to go well." I smiled despite the unexpected change. "Nothing terrible has happened. We just need another plan." He thought for only a moment before his face brightened. "I know a place." We drove a few more blocks until we reached a small independent bookstore with a neighborhood cafe tucked inside. Warm yellow lights glowed through the front windows, making the entire building look welcoming against the rainy evening. The smell of fresh coffee and baked pastries greeted us the moment we stepped inside. Shelves filled with novels, travel books, and photography collections surrounded cozy wooden tables where students quietly studied while soft jazz played in the background. Noah looked relieved. "I was hoping this place would still be open." We ordered simple sandwiches, soup, and hot chocolate instead of the expensive dinner he had originally planned. Sitting across from each other beside a rain-covered window somehow felt more comfortable than any elegant restaurant could have. Outside, the storm continued to fall steadily, but inside the cafe, everything felt calm. We laughed about how completely different the evening had become from Noah's careful plans. Then he reached into his jacket, placed a neatly wrapped package on the table, and smiled with quiet sincerity. "I bought this because something you said during practice stayed with me," he said softly. "You told someone that drawing peaceful places helps you clear your mind. I thought this might inspire you." I looked at the simple brown paper wrapping without opening it immediately, realizing that this evening was becoming memorable not because everything had gone according to plan, but because every unexpected moment was quietly revealing the kind of person Noah truly was. For several quiet minutes, neither of us spoke about why we were really there. We enjoyed the warm food while rain continued tapping gently against the cafe windows, and I carefully unwrapped the small package Noah had placed on the table. Inside was a hardcover photography book filled with breathtaking images of American national parks, mountain lakes, forests glowing with autumn colors, and peaceful rivers stretching toward distant horizons. I slowly turned through several pages before looking back at him. "This is beautiful," I said honestly. "How did you know I would like it?" Noah smiled with a mixture of relief and nervousness. "A few weeks ago, after practice, Tyler asked everyone what they liked to do when they wanted to relax. Most people talked about music or movies. You said you liked drawing landscapes because peaceful places helped you organize your thoughts. You probably forgot saying it, but I did not." I blinked in surprise. I barely remembered that conversation myself. "You remembered something that small?" He nodded. I remember a lot of things about people who matter to me. Those words settled quietly between us. They were not dramatic, yet they carried more weight than any grand speech could have. I lowered my eyes toward the book, suddenly unsure what to say next. Noah wrapped both hands around his coffee mug before taking a slow breath. "There is something I should explain," he said. His voice remained calm, but I noticed he had become noticeably more serious. "I did not invite you here because of a challenge, a joke, or a bet. Nobody even knows I asked you." I looked directly at him. "Then why me?" He smiled faintly, almost as though he had been preparing for that question for a very long time. "Because I noticed you long before you noticed me." I remained completely still. Noah continued before I could interrupt. "During the first week of practice, you always stayed behind after everyone else left. You cleaned equipment that nobody asked you to clean. You thanked coaches after every session. You encouraged another freshman who thought he was slowing everyone down. You probably believed nobody saw those things, but I did." I felt my face grow warm with embarrassment. "I was just trying to help." "Exactly," Noah answered gently. "You never did those things because someone was watching. That is why I admired you." He paused for a moment before speaking again. "Being captain makes every personal decision more complicated. If I talked to you too often, people could assume I was showing favoritism. If I invited you somewhere too early, they could question every lineup decision I made afterward. I kept telling myself to wait until enough time had passed for everyone to know that my leadership would never be influenced by my personal feelings. I finally understood why he had always maintained such careful distance during practice. It had never been indifference. It had been responsibility. "So you have been thinking about this for a while?" I asked quietly. Noah laughed softly and rubbed the back of his neck. "Longer than I probably should admit." I smiled before I could stop myself. "That is actually comforting." His shoulders visibly relaxed as though he had been carrying that explanation for months. Outside, the rain slowly began to lighten, and a few rays of evening sunlight slipped through the clouds, casting a warm golden reflection across the wet streets beyond the cafe window. Watching that quiet change, I realized something inside me had changed as well. I had arrived expecting an awkward dinner filled with uncertainty. Instead, I was sitting across from someone whose honesty made every carefully planned word feel completely unnecessary. And for the first time since Noah had asked me to spend this evening with him, I stopped wondering whether I belonged there and simply enjoyed being exactly where I was. When Noah drove me back to campus that evening, neither of us felt any need to rush the conversation. The storm had passed, leaving the streets shining beneath rows of streetlights while cool autumn air drifted through the slightly open windows of the truck. We talked about favorite movies, childhood vacations, terrible cafeteria food, and the strange adjustment to college life. Every topic seemed ordinary, yet every minute made it easier to forget that only a few days earlier we had barely spoken outside of rowing practice. When he parked outside my residence hall, he turned off the engine but did not immediately reach for the door handle. "Thank you for giving tonight a chance," he said quietly. "I know I asked something unexpected." I smiled at him. "I am glad I said yes." His expression softened with genuine relief. "So am I." Before I stepped out of the truck, he added one more sentence. "Whatever happens next, I do not want you to feel pressured. I would rather earn your trust one day at a time." I nodded because I believed him. That promise stayed with me all weekend. Monday morning arrived with clear skies and another early practice on the river. At first, everything felt perfectly normal. Noah treated every teammate exactly as he always had. He assigned boats fairly, corrected technique with patience, and encouraged everyone equally. If someone had watched practice without knowing about our evening together, they would never have guessed anything had changed. Unfortunately, college campuses had a way of turning small observations into large stories. During breakfast after practice, I carried my tray toward an empty table when I overheard two upperclassmen talking nearby. They stopped the moment I walked past, but I caught enough to understand that my name had already become part of a conversation I never intended to start. One of them lowered his voice and said, "Maybe that explains why the captain keeps checking on him." I pretended not to hear and continued walking, but the words stayed with me. Later that afternoon, while our team prepared equipment for an upcoming regional race, another teammate jokingly asked whether freshmen now received private coaching sessions from the captain. Several students laughed without realizing how uncomfortable the question made me feel. Noah happened to be across the storage room organizing oars and did not hear the comment, but I did. For the first time since our dinner, uncertainty quietly returned. I spent the rest of practice wondering whether everyone would eventually assume that any success I earned came from special treatment instead of hard work. That evening I sat alone in the campus library staring at my open notebook without reading a single page. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that I should solve the problem before it became bigger. If Noah's reputation as captain suffered because of me, I would never forgive myself. The next afternoon, after practice ended, I asked him if we could talk for a minute. We walked toward the empty dock where the river reflected the orange colors of the setting sun. I took a slow breath before speaking. Maybe we should keep some distance for a while. Noah looked genuinely surprised. Why would you say that? People are already talking, I admitted. I do not want anyone believing you are treating me differently because of us. He remained silent for a moment before meeting my eyes with calm determination. Ethan, he said, firmly, I spent months waiting because I wanted to protect both the team and you. I am not going to let rumors decide how I treat someone who matters to me. If there is a problem, I will face it honestly. What I will not do is pretend that last Friday never happened. His words left me speechless because for the first time I realized that the greatest challenge ahead was not whether we cared about each other, but whether we were both willing to stand beside that choice when it became difficult. The conversation beside the river stayed with me long after Noah drove away that evening. His words were simple, yet they carried a confidence I had not expected. He was not pretending that rumors could not exist. He simply refused to let them decide how either of us should live. Even so, I knew college had a way of turning assumptions into stories, and stories often spread much faster than the truth. The following week, our team focused entirely on preparing for the regional rowing competition that would take place on Saturday morning. Practices became longer, coaches demanded sharper technique, and everyone seemed determined to prove that our months of training would pay off. Noah became even more focused than usual. During practice, he corrected every athlete with exactly the same patience and attention, making certain nobody could honestly claim that he treated me differently. If anything, he became slightly tougher on me than before, reminding me to improve my timing and keep my shoulders relaxed during every stroke. At first, I wondered whether he was intentionally creating distance, but then I realized he was simply protecting the fairness of the entire team. Watching him lead with complete consistency made me admire him even more. Saturday arrived with cool morning air and clear blue skies stretching across the river. Families, students, and alumni gathered along the shoreline as dozens of university teams prepared their boats. The atmosphere felt exciting without being overwhelming. Every conversation mixed nervous energy with quiet optimism. Our race was scheduled just after 10 o'clock. As we carried the shell toward the water, Noah gathered everyone into a small circle. Remember why we trained, he said calmly. Trust each other. Stay together. Finish every stroke with confidence. No matter what happens today, we race as one team. Nobody needed a dramatic speech because everyone believed him. When the starting signal echoed across the river, every crew exploded forward at nearly the same speed. The race demanded complete concentration. I stopped thinking about rumors, conversations, and uncertainty. All I heard was the steady rhythm of the oars slicing through the water while Noah's voice called out our pace with calm precision. Stroke after stroke, we moved together until the finish line finally appeared ahead. Our boat crossed in second place, earning one of the qualifying positions for the next stage of the season. Cheers erupted from teammates waiting on shore as we climbed back onto the dock exhausted and smiling. Coaches congratulated everyone for maintaining discipline under pressure. While the team celebrated with group photos and laughter, I quietly stepped away toward a nearby overlook above the river, hoping for a few peaceful minutes alone. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find Noah carrying 2 bottles of water. He handed one to me before leaning against the wooden railing beside me. You rowed well today, he said. I almost missed my timing during the final stretch, I admitted. Noah smiled. You corrected it immediately. That is what matters. We stood together watching sunlight sparkle across the water where the race had ended only minutes earlier. Around us, other teams packed equipment while families applauded athletes finishing later events. Without warning, Noah looked at me with quiet certainty. I am tired of acting as though caring about someone is something to hide. Before I could respond, he gently reached for my hand. His movement was calm, natural, and completely without hesitation. I looked around instinctively, realizing several teammates could easily see us from across the dock. No one noticed my hesitation, but did not let go. People can choose what they believe, he said softly. I have already chosen what matters to me. For the first time since all of this began, I stopped worrying about what everyone else might think. Instead, I smiled back at him, held his hand with quiet confidence, and realized that sometimes the bravest decision was simply choosing not to run away from happiness when it finally found you. The days after the race felt surprisingly peaceful. Whatever rumors had been floating around the team slowly lost their energy because Noah never changed the way he led, and I never expected special treatment. Practice remained demanding. Coaches continued pushing everyone equally, and our second-place finish had given the entire team a shared goal for the remainder of the season. It turned out that consistent actions were much stronger than campus gossip. One Thursday afternoon, after another successful practice, Noah walked beside me as everyone loaded equipment back into storage. "Do you have an hour before your evening class?" he asked. I smiled because by then I no longer questioned his intentions. "I do. Come with me," he said. "There is somewhere I have wanted to show you." We drove only a few miles from campus before stopping near the older section of the university boathouse, a quiet place that freshmen rarely visited because most practices now use the newer facilities across the river. The sun was beginning to set, covering the water with warm shades of orange and gold. Gentle ripples reflected the sky while a cool breeze carried the familiar scent of the river through the empty docks. Everything felt calm, almost frozen in time. Noah rested both hands on the wooden railing and looked across the water before speaking. "This is where I first noticed you." I looked around in surprise. "Here." He nodded. "During freshman orientation, you wandered down here by yourself, while everyone else was exploring campus together. You stood right over there with a sketchbook in your hands." I laughed softly. "I remember drawing the river because I was nervous about starting college." Noah smiled. "I remember pretending to organize equipment just so I could stay nearby a little longer." I turned toward him, genuinely surprised. "You never told me that." "I was embarrassed," he admitted with an easy laugh. The captain of the rowing team was supposed to be confident, but every time I thought about introducing myself, I convinced myself it would be awkward. I could not help smiling at the image of Noah Brooks feeling uncertain about anything. He reached into his jacket pocket and carefully unfolded a small piece of paper that had clearly been opened many times before. "Do you recognize this?" he asked. I looked closely before immediately realizing what it was. It was the campus map every new student received during orientation, except one corner had been neatly folded around a handwritten schedule. "That is mine," I said in disbelief. "I thought I lost it." Noah nodded. "You accidentally left it on the dock that day." I picked it up intending to return it, but by the time I looked around, you had already disappeared. He handed it back to me with a slightly embarrassed smile. "I kept it because I thought it would give me an excuse to talk to you later. Instead, I carried it around for months without finding the right moment." I unfolded the paper carefully and laughed when I noticed a tiny pencil sketch I had absent-mindedly drawn in one corner during orientation. Somehow he had preserved it all this time. "You planned our first evening together long before you invited me, did not you?" I asked quietly. Noah looked out across the glowing river before answering with complete honesty. "I started hoping for that evening almost from the first day we met. I simply wanted to wait until I believed you would never wonder whether my position as captain influenced my feelings." I folded the map carefully and slipped it into my pocket, realizing that every unanswered question I had carried for weeks had quietly found its answer beside the same peaceful river where our story had truly begun. The rest of the semester passed more quickly than either of us expected. Classes became more demanding, rowing practices grew even more intense, and our team continued preparing for the championship race that everyone had been working toward since the first day of training. Somewhere between early morning practices, late nights in the library, shared cups of coffee, and quiet walks across campus after class, spending time together stopped feeling unusual and simply became part of our everyday lives. Nobody on the team questioned Noah's leadership anymore because his actions had remained consistent from beginning to end. He treated every athlete fairly, encouraged everyone equally, and never allowed personal feelings to interfere with his responsibilities. In return, the quiet rumors that once seemed so overwhelming gradually disappeared, replaced by something much simpler. People saw two students who respected each other, supported each other, and genuinely enjoyed being together. When the championship weekend finally arrived, the entire campus seemed energized. Families gathered along the river, classmates carried school banners, and coaches moved from boat to boat offering final encouragement before the races began. Standing beside Noah before we launched, I realized how different I felt from the nervous freshman who had arrived months earlier believing he needed to earn a place where he belonged. I already belonged. I belonged on this team, in this university, and beside the person quietly adjusting the strap on his life jacket before giving me the same reassuring smile that had slowly become my favorite part of every day. The race itself demanded every ounce of concentration we had. Stroke after stroke, our boat moved with complete unity, each person trusting everyone else without hesitation. When we crossed the finish line, cheers erupted from both shores of the river. We had won the championship by less than a second. The margin was incredibly small, yet in that unforgettable moment it felt enormous. Teammates embraced one another, coaches celebrated with proud smiles, and dozens of photographs captured memories that would stay with us long after graduation. Later that evening, after the awards ceremony ended and the campus slowly grew quiet again, Noah asked if I wanted to take one more walk before heading home. We followed the familiar path leading toward the old boathouse where he had first noticed me during freshman orientation. The river reflected hundreds of tiny lights from nearby buildings, while a cool autumn breeze carried the peaceful sound of water. Against the dock, everything felt remarkably similar to the place where so much had quietly begun. Noah stopped beside the railing and smiled with the same calm sincerity that had first drawn my attention months earlier. "Do you remember the first question I ever asked you?" he said. I laughed softly. How could I forget? He nodded toward the small neighborhood bookstore cafe glowing across the street from the river. "I made a reservation there tonight," he said. "Nothing complicated this time. No perfect plan. Just dinner." I looked at him, pretending to think for a moment before smiling. "Yes." He laughed. "I did not even ask yet." "You did not have to," I answered. "I already know my answer." We began walking together toward the cafe, side by side, no longer worried about misunderstandings, expectations, or what anyone else might think. I reached into my jacket pocket and felt the folded orientation map that Noah had returned to me, still carefully protected after all those months. It reminded me that some journeys begin long before we recognize them, and some invitations become far more meaningful than anyone could ever imagine. Looking at Noah beside me beneath the warm glow of the streetlights, I realized our first date had never truly been about dinner. It had been about finding the courage to trust someone who had quietly chosen me from the very beginning. And as we stepped through the cafe door together once again, it felt less like the ending of a story and more like the first chapter of everything that still waited ahead.